I have some thoughts that I want to share, some ahas. I had this um, big kind of an insight that happened toward the end of last week as I was looking at the world. So the title of this is Kundalini, Individual, National, and the Reawakening of Human Development. So after 3 years of really being intensely unsettled about what's happening in our world, I was last week suddenly very calm. It's like I knew something, the body knew. And I was very aware of that shift without being able to pinpoint why. Where's that coming from? What am I knowing that I'm not aware of? So it got me thinking about our situation, and that resulted in several big aha moments. So years ago, when I was dealing with the little men in brown robes, they were trying to talk me into writing down what they had been showing to me, and I wasn't very willing. And so I'm going to repeat here some of that conversation, okay? So the robes said, quote, well, even if you will help one individual, it will be good. But we think you seriously underestimate the growing need people intuitively feel for something that will help them understand and cope with the coming changes. At the very least, you would help remind people that creativity, fresh vision, and courage are very useful in times of intense change. So I thought about that for a few minutes, and I was thinking about teaching my classes to hundreds of individuals over the previous 11 years. And I was well acquainted with the fact that a sudden reawakening of human development caused intense change in people's lives. And I always warned my students on the first day of class, watch out, this class will change your life. And there's no going back. You need to be aware that it could be an overwhelming change. So go slowly, easily. And let me just insert in here that it's the entire world, all of us have been victims of what I would call arrested development. We are not done developing as human beings. We're like flowers that have grown up, but we haven't gone to seed yet. In other words, we haven't produced the legacy that should follow this kind of development. We're designed to become different organically. So that stoppage or that break in human development has resulted in a mess in our world and in people, in their hearts and in their minds. So aloud, I said to the robes, what if I write this stuff down and it causes the same chaos on a large scale that I've witnessed on an individual scale? And then what if people end up saying that the problems are all my fault? The robes said, well, why would you be willing to teach and guide people one at a time, yet be unwilling to teach a group of people? And my response to that and their casual attitude, their casual attitude just boggled me. And I kind of scraped around for a response. And it was kind of like, it's a problem of scale. One or two people or a classroom full of people going through the sudden reawakening of consciousness is one thing, but a planet, wow. And there are usually several periods of serious doubt, sometimes even a backlash, an effort to forget everything you know and go back to the old ways. And the robes replied, well, you should certainly understand the efforts to forget what you know and go back to old ways. And they were zeroing in on my own difficulties in understanding and accepting all the things they had shown to me, all the changes that were coming. But they said, nevertheless, you will eventually come to deal with this quite well. In the meantime, consider whether you think it would be better to suffer without vision, hope, or understanding, or to work your way through such changes with hope, having at least some idea of where you're going and some understanding of what you're moving toward. So I responded by saying, well, yeah, I guess some idea of what's happening would be better than none. And so they said, well, we will leave you to your writing then, as if everything had been agreed upon. So that's the excerpt that comes, I think, from page 224 and 225 in the book Robes. So in reflecting on this conversation with Robes, I was wondering if we were going to get into the period of chaos and confusion that accompanies an awakening, when it hit me like a ton of bricks that we were already there. We're in it. The language out there was all about awakening, even including the stuff about being woke. And there was chaos and confusion in many places and at many levels. It dawned on me that we were working our way through a national awakening of consciousness that would reverse the arrested development we had been suffering from for the past 100 years. We had resumed the process of human development, and we were wrestling with the natural results. In the past, many people have asked me if a Kundalini awakening is always dramatic and sexually explosive, and I have bluntly said no. No, and in fact, the best kind of awakening is the slow, steady kind, the kind that you seek or that you pray for or you meditate on because you want further spiritual development. But you want it to give you time to adjust. It's still very difficult, and some people don't make it through, but it can be handled without the fear that you're going insane. So I'm just going to say point blank, we are in the midst of a spiritual awakening of consciousness, a Kundalini event for the planet. Everybody is struggling with it, especially people in the West. So I'm going to run through the symptoms of a Kundalini awakening. Okay? And there's quite a few. There's no area of life that is left untouched. So it begins with some sort of unexpected or disturbing event or information that rocks our world. It could be a devastating pandemic. It could be a damaging injection. It could be a wildly contested and argued election. It could be the sudden announcement that ETs exist. Maybe a financial collapse, a massive train wreck that just forces you out of your home, information about child sex trafficking or something similar. But it's an event that your consciousness just, it rocks your world, rocks your mind. Next, the new information continues coming at you from every direction, and you don't want to acknowledge it. You don't know how to handle it. You don't know how to think about it. You don't know what to do with it, and you just wish it would stop. Then you begin to worry and you become extremely, extremely sensitive to all information or change. You start trying to pick out what you think is true or correct or what's real or not real, etc. As you do that, the changes in consciousness continue accelerating. We begin to see and hear subtle things about the world that we never noticed, never cared about. Things like, our government is really unresponsive. Look at all the unethical legal proclamations, excessive taxation, abusive policies, many thousands of missing children, etc. Those things aren't so subtle. But when you're busy trying to make a living and you're not paying attention, you can overlook those until all of a sudden you can't. Then things begin to fall apart. Plans fail. Stress mounts as you try to hang on to old ways and live as you have always lived, maintaining comfort by ignoring issues. So you try to ignore it all, and you condemn those who don't want to hear what you have to say, or who blame you or accuse you of being a troublemaker, or that you're nuts or whatever. So as things fall apart, nothing means what it used to mean. Right there, big spiritual change. Change in meaning. Nothing means what it used to mean. Things that were important, you don't care about anymore. Things that you never thought about suddenly become central. Then there are attempts to ignore issues, and that causes sleepless nights. Okay, it causes greatly reduced hours of sleep, if you can get any sleep. Sometimes there are nightmares when we do sleep. The fact that we're fighting ourselves results in poor health. And there's a feeling everywhere that things are out of control. That confusion is caused when consciousness attempts to override the decision to ignore issues. We hear voices sometimes. People that are clairaudient will hear this thought, almost like a voice in their head, and wonder, where did that come from? They will notice odd visual things, odd visual synchronicities and messages. All of a sudden, the artists and the prophets and the priests and the people who are paying attention start to say things that are direct, that directly conflict with your wish to keep avoiding. So you begin to experience an inner knowing and urges to do something different. And yet still, you hang on to the old ways, the old thinking you can go back to the way it was. The stress mounts. Eventually, the result is an inability to keep doing what we have always done, keep thinking what we have always thought, and keep pretending the way we have always pretended. There can be the experience of being in two places or two times at once. I've heard people say, this reminds me, or this sounds like the 1920s, or this crash that's coming is just like the crash of 1929, or all kinds of two places or two times at once perception. The feeling is that the world is collapsing. And there can also be the loss of physical boundaries. All of a sudden, it's hard to determine where you begin and end. In a nation, that's a collapse of boundaries of that nation. And we see that everywhere. Just look south in the United States. Okay, there are sometimes periods of intense heat and cold physically, odd pains, sometimes odd stabbing pains in your feet or your back or your head, and intense passion that you just have to do this, have to say this, have to go after that information, can't do this, can't do that, because you have to do these other things. The periods of intense heat and cold, we can translate to somebody's messing with our weather. Causing intense heat and cold are periods, long, extended, unnatural periods of intense heat or intense cold in the winters. And the odd pains, those come directly from stress. So eventually we become unable to discern what is real and what is not real. And there we have the deep fakes, the computer generated images. Is that real? Is that not real? Did he really say that? Did somebody borrow his voice? We become unable to discern what is real and not real. We become unable to discern what is possible and not possible, along with what is good and not good. Okay? This goes on in a Kundalini type awakening, an awakening of consciousness for about 1.5 to 3 years. That's your initial shock period. All physical, mental, and emotional reserves are used up. People begin dying. Okay, we see that around us. I won't say too much about that because I don't want to get in trouble, but we see that the results of the, we'll say the shock information, the shock of having poor information pushed at us and the decisions we make around that result in some people leaving. So all physical, mental, and emotional reserves are used up. We can no longer hold off the inevitable, no longer force ourselves to keep to the old ways, the old jobs, or the old ideas. And you reach a breaking point after about 3 years. It's a serious breaking point. For myself, at about 1.5 years in, I just stayed in my house. I couldn't go out. I couldn't manage what was happening out there. That's the equivalent to us being in lockdown. And we're now at the 3-year point. Everything is breaking or breaking open. I prefer to think of it as breaking open. So once that occurs, there's less dependence on old institutions. Yeah, we've been getting by without them for 1 year or 2. Why go back to them? The population begins to experience the death dream in the form of watching the old systems falter and die. And they are forced to change habits, perceptions, lifestyles, and ideas. Okay, let me say something about that. In the unfolding of a shaman, of a seriously deep waking up process in an individual, there comes a point where you experience death in a very intimate, very intense way. In the old days, a lot of times people who are living in jungles would experience being eaten by a tiger, torn apart by a tiger. Sometimes they would be swallowed by a snake. The tiger is the symbol of consciousness, and the snake is the symbol of awakening. And in industrial kinds of places or modern civilization where we're not really exposed to the jungle forces, a lot of times the death experience is one of drowning, one of being murdered, or one of being hung. And I had that experience twice. And once I was murdered, suffocated, and in the other I was hung by my neck. So we have really hit that point of the death dream. As we watch the old systems falter, what we're witnessing is the actual death of many, many people. And the dream, the American dream, the dream of the West, and when I say the West, I mean the collective West, that dream has been to control the world, and it's not going to happen. So that realization, we hit the wall. That realization has to be let go of. And then there's a protracted period of chaos in the world. Okay, and we're headed into that right now. Okay. Once you let go of the old, there's a sense of complete emptiness, no agenda. And occasionally the physical world actually fades away. Or sometimes there's thoughts of, I'm out of here, that kind of thing. That's all due to that emptying out, the final emptying out of your clinging to the illusions that you grew up with. And that's where we are. We're headed into that now. It will probably last, if we're lucky, 6 months. If we're not so lucky, maybe 2 or 3 years, another 2 or 3 years, a whole cycle. A cycle is 7 years. We've already been through 3 years. Okay, we're into the 4th year. We're headed into the serious chaos. Once you let go of everything that you used to think and do and be, then what? Then nothing works anymore. Okay. So there's a sense of complete emptiness. Then there's an attention. Now your attention begins to go to all kinds of hidden or previously unnoticed details. And that alternates with a very scattered focus and uncertainty. Okay, so you're seeing more and more, but you're unable to organize it. There's hardly any structures in place. Structures are still falling apart. Old systems are not working, all sorts of things. And we are facing an energy shortfall and a food shortfall over the next 2 years. We will have to navigate that. And we'll have to spend time and energy dealing with that and making sure that we stay cool and warm and well fed. That takes time and energy. So there's attention to many hidden or previously unnoticed or even uncared about details, which alternate with the scattered focus and uncertainty. Is it working? Am I going to be okay? You know, what's happening? There is the falling away of much trivia. People are not interested so much in being entertained or in having their consciousness be titillated with stupid stuff. It's a life or death kind of situation. Often there's a complete change in family, friend, and relationships. Big changes there. And we've seen that. We've all had a taste of that. The whole way of life comes under review. Well, this isn't working. What can I do? What should I do? What are my options, etc.? We begin to ask, who am I? Who am I and what do I need to do? What do I need to learn? And there's a recognition also that the world is not working the way we once thought it did. Okay, so the first turning point is reached when we face our fears squarely and prepare to do what we have to do. Okay, we're coming to that. We're almost there. Some people are there. There's quite a few lagging behind. But that first turning point is when you face your fears squarely and you realize what has to be done. Might not be what you want, might not be comfortable, but it has to be done. So on a national level, that may mean having to rethink and reorganize government, rethink and reorganize finance, rethink and reorganize all of the food production, all of the factory production, how we get energy, how we heal ourselves, everything, our work, our factories, our relationships with others, everything. So at the same time, there is an increased interest in health and changes in diet. On a national level, when you watch people dying, it's like, whoa, what do I need to do to be healthy? What do I need to eat? And when there's not enough food to eat, and you don't have all of the processed food that you've been subsisting on for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and you start eating real food, you're going to end up in a massive detox situation in the body. If you don't know how to do hospital grade detox, you're in trouble. You will go down, you will suffer, you may even die. So detoxing, good health, better food, better diet, that has not only the detox consequences, but that changes consciousness. Real food changes your sense of who you are and how you see, feel, hear, and act within the world. There's a greater sense of power in your life and over your life. As a nation, we need that. There's a sudden interest in and understanding of topics or concepts without even being taught. All of a sudden you open, and what happens is you discover that information will just come to you. You understand. It's almost like it's in the air. It was always in the air, but you were too closed. So that's followed by this willingness to begin exploring and experimenting with things that we think will work, things that will help us handle the situation and move beyond the situation. So lots of exploration and experimentation goes on. Then there's a desire also to contribute to the general good. Evil is everywhere around us right now. I don't like that term, but there's no other term that encompasses all the ugliness, the meanness, the selfishness, the stupidity, the willingness to hurt others. That stuff is evil. We aren't naturally like that. That's a result of being fed poorly, of being propagandized, of being convinced that in order to fit in and be able to continue to survive, we have to adopt all kinds of stupid, hurtful, meaningless kinds of ideas. So we begin to move over to a willingness to only do good in the world. There's a new and evolving and improving set of ethics, values, and morals that people begin to embrace. And that we need that. We definitely need that. There's also a big interest in truth and justice, and that will manifest as justice, going after those who perpetrated harm to others on a big scale, big scale. There will be also, this is one of the things I love, a replacement of sarcasm and cynicism with a true sense of humor, a real sense of humor. So first anger starts to die, and then sarcasm starts to die, and then cynicism starts to die. And then we get to this place where we have a true sense of humor and a practical approach to living. There are still periods of being overwhelmed by powerful emotions that bring tears and grieving, and that's intermittent. That will last for approximately 1.5 to 2 years, the period of crying. Just being tears of devotion, tears of relief, tears of it didn't have to be that way. Look how awful it was. Oh my gosh. What happened to us? Grief has to be felt, and we have to experience that and cry. There's also an increased creativity and an ability to think outside the box. Thank God. A much greater flexibility and adaptability. People are willing to try new stuff. So when that occurs, people, events, and perceptions take on new meanings. Everything means something new and different. People that you may have poo-pooed or laughed at before, or just hated, now you begin to listen, and they're not so bad after all. Everything takes on new meaning. There's better communication skills because we listen more. There's an increased tolerance for all things except evil. People are absolutely committed to do no harm, to make the world a better place. Okay. And when you get to that point, what happens is there's a greater flow through of energy through the human body mind system. And there's new energy available physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And that will play out with new forms of energy available. Not only will we return to fossil fuels for stability purposes, and maybe develop in a few places some alternatives, but there are other forms of energy that typically occur on a national or global basis. New energy is released that has been suppressed. Okay, and then when that occurs, we come to the second turning point. And the second turning point is characterized by the true heart mind beginning to assert itself. The true heart mind begins to emerge. And that is accompanied or followed by the adoption of whole new belief systems. All of the conflicting stories, about this church is evil and that church is good, and there's ETs and there's no ETs, and there's corruption and there's no, all those conflicting stories begin to be understood. And there's this kind of a threading of the way through all of that to something that goes beyond all of that. And there's a whole new worldview, whole new set of beliefs that come out of this second turning point. There's also a commitment to your true purpose. And in terms of a global Kundalini or global awakening, that's a commitment to our true purpose in terms of planetary systems of consciousness coming together as one, not a new world order, but as one group of people who are really committed to establishing relationships around the cosmos, to embracing that which is good, committing to doing no harm, making sure that everything we engineer and build does no harm. Okay. So in service to that commitment to purpose, there will be sudden visions that occur in certain people whose purpose is aligned with science or engineering or art or manufacturing or sudden visions that allow us to see and hear forward or backward in time, or an alliance with visionary leaders through whose eyes we can see forward and backward in time. So there's a whole new respect for the ideas that this one has, or the visions that one has, or the messages that this one gets, or whatever. All of those are highly respected and they're compiled. So, and that's because people are more open. They don't want to go back to the way it used to be. So there's also an emergence of this feeling of wholeness throughout the population. That the whole national thing has been useful in many ways to help, how do I say this, help a population maximize their potential in a particular location, their resources, in order to help them develop and reach higher states of consciousness, using the tools, the supplies, the resources, all of the qualities and characteristics that it takes to live in their location. And that then results in groups coming together around the planet. Wonderful, wonderful groups. And there's a sense of wholeness that we're the people of planet Earth. So there are instances also of feeling like you're one with the entire world. Those are wonderful moments. The development of compassion begins to appear, a compassion for all living things. Okay. There's an emergence of gentleness, the emergence of a new worldview. It's actually a cosmic worldview. There's the development of patience. There's still people who have to be brought along, people who have to be healed, people who have to be taken care of. So there's patience with them. There are whole new thought patterns, new intentions, and goals. New thought patterns allow us to see new possibilities. New patterns develop as a result of what we're doing with consciousness. And that results in new goals. Let's see if we can do this. Let's see if we can create that. Let's see if we can design and build such and such. So then there's the emergence of unconditional love. We certainly need that. Even a taste of that would be wonderful. And then following that, there's the emergence of natural intelligence. That's when each individual begins to listen to the small, still voice within. Collectively, that has a huge impact on us as a population. That begins to make a people of one mind without being hive mind. People who are in sync, they're in harmony, they're cohesive, they work together. Everyone is listened to. That then triggers the reversal of arrested development. So the inner work to successfully complete the early stages of development is done. It's done on a very wide level, mass level. And children who are born in that stage, when we are working on completing the early stages of sensory motor, mental operations, concrete and formal operations, that has a huge impact on those children. They outstrip us hands down by the time they are 10. Okay. And then there's progress. We begin to move through the development of the later stages of human development. This is something that comes from the evolving human. And then following that, there is the development of new senses and new forms of awareness. And it's just natural in the children that we give birth to and that we educate and that we develop completely. Okay, there are long-term effects, organic changes in the body-mind system. There are changes in brain structure and function. And the final thing is the emergence of the inner peace. And that inner peace results in bringing all the gifts of consciousness. So we are headed in the right direction. Just let me remind you that the awakening of Kundalini is the awakening of consciousness. We're in it. We just haven't recognized it till now. Or maybe somebody else did. I didn't recognize it till just now, but all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow. Here we are. Amazing. I think what we're seeing is a Kundalini type awakening in the greater population. So when a group is going to make an effort to take a big step in terms of consciousness, they will set up a big challenge to come at them. So here we are. The dark side is coming at us full force. However, I know from personal experience that once the awakening has begun, it proceeds with an energy of its own. And that energy is intelligent, it's powerful, and all of those qualities that I listed after the second turning point, compassion, unconditional love, patience, gentleness, etc., those are the natural results of an awakening. We're walking right into it. There are only a few requirements for success in making it through the awakening process. The first is, and this is non-negotiable, You must follow your heart and spend your life doing what you want and what you love. Let me repeat that. The first requirement for success is that you must follow your heart and spend your life doing what you want and what you love. Why? Because in doing so, you run into all of the lessons that you personally need to advance your consciousness. All those things that you want and won't let yourself do, they have information and lessons that change your core. So, and the implications of that on a global scale are huge. Following your heart, doing what you want and what you love, how many are still going to keep going to jobs? How many are going to stay in relationships that are miserable? That's the hard part of the awakening process, is you cannot force yourself to do what you don't want to do and what you're not here to do. And the second requirement is that you keep your eye on the light, on what is good and beautiful and true. Okay? Do not spend all of your time agonizing, worrying, seeking revenge, caught up in anger, fear of poverty or not having enough, or any of that thinking. Yes, you will wrestle with various problems and challenges, big ones, big, big, big challenges. But that is because you need to resolve them. They have to be resolved. There are other ways. I figured it out. You can too. We can too. We will. We are in the process of figuring it out. So once you've been around and around with a problem and you've done enough worry and enough agonizing and having enough fears and on, give yourself directions to come up with a solution. Just give yourself directions. Okay, I give myself directions to come up with some kind of solution. And then let a possibility or various possibilities come to you. Okay? And they'll come one at a time. Don't reject the first one instantly. Okay? Don't automatically just toss that out the window. Actually consider, what would it take to use that solution? What would it take? What would you have to face? What would you have to deal with? Would you have to start over? Typically you do. But there are ways to start over. There are many ways to start over. So if you don't think you can make that solution work after serious consideration, then thank the universe and give directions for another solution, a better solution, something better. Keep going with that process until you have a solution that is perfect. And typically in the process of figuring out, could I make that work? How could I handle that? What would it mean? What would I have to do differently? How would I have to think differently? You end up changing yourself. You end up in the pool of creation. And you will begin to see how limited other people are, how they're afraid of their own creativity. So in my Kundalini experiences, there were some deep challenges. I lost everything. I lost my great love. I lost my house. I lost my appliances and my furniture. I lost my children. I lost my job. I lost my consciousness. I lost my ability to manage perception. I lost my money. I lost my credit score. I lost everything. Everything. So, be aware. If I had done it smarter, I wouldn't have had to lose half of that. If I had believed in myself a little bit more, It would have been much easier. If I had had even a clue of how to use consciousness at that period of time, I might have been able to breeze right through it, relatively speaking. You still have to adjust to the changes. So, we may go through some of those really deep challenges over the next 2 years, but I would hope that you will recognize the progress and the process and realize that something wonderful is happening unless we collapse and hand over our power. Something wonderful is happening. The whole awakening process is designed to bring you to your power. When that happens on a collective scale, you've taken a huge step in terms of your planetary ascension. We're not here really to ascend individually. We're here to take the entire planet eternal. Okay? So let me repeat that last statement. The whole awakening process is designed to bring you to your power. It's designed to bring us to our power. I think we are the 5th or 6th civilization. The others failed. Let's not fail. Don't give away your power. Okay? I'll close here. Thank you for listening and have a great day.